So when I took to the internet for a rubber chicken for this service, and I never thought I would say those words in that order, but I learned through the magic of the algorithm that reflective vests for real chickens, live chickens, are a thing you can buy. They are real, and they cost $19.99. They come in 6 colors. I'm not making any of this up. So if you have a chicken at home who has been wanting to cross the road, that is a real product that exists for your situation. So this sermon is a little different than what I planned, because on the day I was going to write this sermon, things did not go as planned. So if you all remember Theo, my parakeet, he was here a few weeks ago, so some of you met him. And the day that I was going to write this sermon, Theo woke up and chose violence. So that day, Theo was acting a little cranky, and so I gave him some new food, and that didn't seem to help, so I made the mistake of offering Theo a chance to spend some time outside of his cage. And he's always been fine outside of his cage. He jumps on your shoulder, he asks you, who's a pretty bird? And he gives you some wolf whistles, and then this is the important part. He goes back in the cage. That's key. But Theo was not feeling it, and he jumped on top of his cage instead of onto my shoulder. I didn't take it personally, because sometimes he does that. He's just he's about to molt. He's in a bad mood. It puts birds in a bad mood. So I turned my back thinking he was just going to go back in. That's usually what happens. But he did not go back in. I opened the door because I had some seltzer by the door, on the outside of the door, and I reached down to get it, and I heard a whoosh. And then there Theo was standing in front of me on the porch. And Theo will step right into your hand. So I threw the seltzer, and I put my hand out, and I said, "Come here, Theo." And Theo looked at me, and I looked at Theo, and he considered his options. And I'm sure he thought about our deep bond, and then off he went. Now, I should probably tell you now, though, that Theo is fine. He is home in his cage. He is preening himself, and he's probably singing his little falsetto song about how he is Theodonculus, the redonculus, right now. And side note, the songs people make up to sing to their pets are the best songs. So anyway, Theo is fine. But for about 4 hours, he enjoyed the best day of his life. And I reconsidered all my life choices. So after I frantically ran around the yard for about 4 hours, holding that giant bird cage in my fluffy pink shark slippers, repeatedly singing Theodonculus the redonculus loud enough for all the neighbors to hear, in an attempt to charm him, and even tried to convincingly eat bird treats. Looks enticing. Theo finally landed on a tree in our neighbor's yard where some workers were doing construction. And without us asking for help, let alone for them to risk their lives, which they really did, these men who didn't know us, didn't have to help, had plenty of other things to do, climbed way up in the trees, much higher than my judgment thought was a good idea. And they somehow helped us convince Theo to come down to us. They were, as brave and as selfless as if Theo had been a human child. And once he was safely inside, I put together a basket of food for them, and I gave them my seltzer. But we humans are so complicated and amazing. The kindness of those construction workers reminded me of a time at the height of the anti-mask and anti-vaccine movement when I saw someone stop a whole lane of traffic to rescue a baby bird. And life has that kind of complexity too. The beauty is right there in the messiness and in the anxiety And humor, which was supposed to be the topic today before Theo stole that show a little bit, it's right there in the dark with us. The title of this sermon is, "You're Not Silly Enough." And I don't mean you personally. I mean the people watching online. I mean the world right now. And we all need more joy and more lightness. And some of you might be wondering why now, of all times, I'm telling you to be more silly with everything going on in the world. Isn't that frivolous? Isn't it disrespectful to the people who are dying? Aren't their lives sacred? And I want to say, we don't make time for laughter because life isn't sacred. We make time for laughter because it is. Sometimes life is too hard not to laugh. I've heard it said that if you want to know what you would have done during the civil rights movement or the Holocaust, just look at what you're doing now. And it's true. There are always, at all points in human history, injustices and atrocities happening, and what we are doing now is what we would have done. It was not any simpler or easier or safer than it is now. There are daily tragedies and injustices, small and large, and there always have been. It's always been hard to know truths that counter the narrative of the powerful, and even harder when those truths call us to change. So yes, what you are doing now is what you would have done then. Whatever horror in history seems so clear in retrospect, it was no different from what you face now. But if no one laughed until injustice and suffering were ended, there would never be a time to laugh in all of human history. Civil rights leaders and members of the resistance laughed sometimes. They didn't just go around posing. The horrors and injustices require a response precisely because there is more to life than pain and struggle. Because another world is possible. And we know that because we have joy in our lives. Humor doesn't have to be a way to ignore the hard things. It can be a path through them. The beauty is right there. A way to find the connections with each other and give us the strength and sense of community to resist injustice. A way to overcome our divisions, an excuse to wear silly hats. That's why saints like Saint Simeon, the holy fool, used to go to church to tease people. Simeon would go and throw nuts at people and blow out the candles. To remind them that the spiritual life isn't about showcasing our virtue and being so serious. Spiritual life is about getting more and more in touch with the ordinary and yet miraculous realities of life, being open to contradictions and complexity, being curious. When you do that, you lighten up. That's why the times that often seem the holiest at funerals are those moments when you laugh. We take ourselves too seriously. We think we're just one unchanging thing that must be protected at all costs. And then if someone criticizes us, we can't just laugh. We get very defensive and we might lash out. And you see it a lot in politics today. It's a sign of how polarized we've become that sometimes comedians are the worst offenders. Someone tells them a joke isn't funny, and they lecture everyone about it for an hour the next time they have a show. And it's a very natural human instinct, and it's also totally irrational. We're not just one thing. You don't have some unchanging self. You're nothing like you were 3 years ago or 5 years ago. A lot of us probably wouldn't even get along with our teenage selves. I know mine was a whole lot. Listened to a lot of bad music with a lot of earnestness. Taking ourselves too seriously makes it very hard to find ways through the conflicts that we are facing. It makes it hard to value other people the way we should if we're too busy defending ourselves. And if we lighten up, we can be open to love instead of only focusing on ourselves. We can know it is okay that we made a mistake. It's okay that we're not the best. It's okay that we can't control everything and make a world that's perfectly safe. Trying to make a world that's perfectly safe is ironically very dangerous. It's a path to endless conflict. A few weeks ago, I told you the story of the hummingbird who kept trying to put out the forest fire despite the hopeless odds. And there's another story of a hummingbird. It comes from the Ohlone people in California. And in that story, a jealous coyote tries to kill Hummingbird all these different ways, and Hummingbird just keeps coming back to life. Coyote stomps on Hummingbird, and Coyote throws her in the fire. And Hummingbird is like Jason in Friday the 13th, just keeps coming back. And finally, Coyote eats Hummingbird and finds that once Hummingbird is inside him, he's not doing so well, because hummingbirds have very sharp beaks. And he hears the hummingbird inside him laughing and telling him that the only way to solve his problem now is to send him all the way through. And you can imagine how that goes with the beak and the claws, so that Coyote has one very unpleasant trip to the bathroom and the hummingbird is free. The unwise parts of us that make us try to dominate and harm can't digest joy and love and humor. And those good parts of us can endure and help us get through any circumstance. This is a moment in history that is as pivotal as any have ever been. What you would have done then is what you are doing now. So act with love and urgency, but don't forget that you need joy to survive while you do it. And if your pet bird is about to start molting, don't let him out. Amen.